Population genetics has been an absolutely fundamental mathematical part of biology for 100 years. Other areas of biology, my own, where I've spent most of my own life, ecology, is a very young subject.
And for a long time, ecology was very rooted in kind of a natural history view of the world. So going out and really describing in detail all the wonderful, wonderful details of natural systems and ecosystems, and studying the plants and animals in great detail. And so it had a very descriptive quality. And what mathematics has enabled is to kind of take a couple of steps back and to start to abstract and to look for patterns across systems and to make broader generalities about what we think that we're seeing in nature and what it's trying to tell us.
A much more sophisticated understanding of that would articulate how species very specifically depend on one another to stay alive. And that is a fascinating problem for me to understand. The balance of nature and how things depend on one another is hugely motivating.
We really still do not understand some of the patterns we see in food webs. And by food webs, I mean you take the various species of plants that are getting energy from the sun to be the basis of all life, and then various species eating the plants and species eating the things that eat the plants. And we can construct a web by drawing, as it were, lines in a diagram from the various species that eat the plants to the plants they eat. Some will eat only one plant, some will eat lots of plants. And then we can draw lines from the predators that eat the herbivores, and some of the omnivores like us that eat the plants and the animal. And you get a web of interconnections. And now you can ask questions about the dynamics of that topological web structure.
Ecosystems are a paradigmatic, complex system. There's lots of species, there's lots of individuals, there's many different kinds of interactions between those species and individuals and populations, and there's the abiotic environment, there's the climate and the soil and the history of the site. And so this is obviously a complex system.
In my Little Rock Lake food web, there's tens of millions of different food chains within it. It's only got 100 species. It's got about 1,000 links amongst those 100 species, but there are millions of food chains there. And the computer can just travel down look through every single food chain and characterize its length, who it goes through.
This is a food web that has 20 species, and these are also what we use to run dynamics on. And so each of these links and each of these species are linked together by differential equations.
These equations keep track of the biological energy that's existing within a species and that goes between species when they eat each other.
And so what's happening is, of course, the balls are the species, and then these links are the feeding links between the species. And if you look at any particular species at this sphere, as it grows, that shows that the biomass for that species is actually getting larger. And the links also show the increases and decreases of energy flow between species. And if you actually follow, say if you look at this species, which is an herbivore, and it feeds on these two plants, primary producers, as they tend to get bigger, it'll start feeding more off of them, and it'll increase in biomass and driving their biomass down. And what's also happening is that eventually there's some extinctions that will go on just naturally as a result of the dynamics. And I think one species already went extinct while I was talking.
And what we find is that often ecosystems are quite robust. Removing a species, at least within our models, doesn't immediately mean the loss of other species. But we find specific species, people have called them keystones in nature, keystone species in nature, that if you take those things out, you lose lots of other species. It upsets the balance of nature, and many species go extinct because a particular species has been taken out of it.
And this is something actually that modeling has shown us, or has shown me, is that it's very hard to know ahead of time when you lose a particular species, even if it's a teeny tiny little fly that you think, oh, it would be great to get rid of this fly, or who knows what would, we don't think anything would happen if we got rid of it. But it could be through the web of interactions of these feeding relationships that it could actually end up having significant impacts on things that are very important to humans.
And it can be tricky, and also because sometimes the message you're hearing clearly from the science doesn't fit easily with intuition.
People are skeptical of equations. They're skeptical of computer models. They're not sure it represents what's going on in nature. A big research agenda item for our group here is to demonstrate how closely the equations mimic nature.